Welcome to Behind the Schemes, a discussion of how commerce, corruption, and counterfeit cures are destroying our planet's precious wildlife. This is Rhishja Cota-Larson with Behind the Schemes, and in this episode we're talking about the increased demand for lion bones. Now that suppliers for the traditional Chinese medicine trade have depleted the world's wild tiger population to fewer than 4,000 tigers, they are turning to lions as the main ingredient in the various health potions and wines previously made from tiger bones and body parts. Dr. Pieter Kat of LionAid gives us the inside story on how the existing legal trade in lions is contributing to this worrying trend. How many African wild lions are left?
That's an interesting question, Rhishja, because the real answer is that we know to some extent how many are left, but we don't know exactly how many are left. For example, we think that there might have been about 200,000 lions in the 1960s, but this is not based on somebody going out and actually counting all of them. This is based on extrapolations from small pieces of information. But anyway, about 200,000 in the 1960s, and about, we think these days, 20 to 25,000 in total that are left.
Gosh.
Now, as you know, 20 to 25,000 might sound like a large number, but Africa is a very, very large continent. And what is actually happening is that a lot of those populations are very small. You know, you've got 20 here, 30 there, 40 there. And when you add them all up together, you get to 20 to 25,000. So it's not like there's you know, a huge number of lions in one particular place or anything like that.
Has this decline in the population been steady, or are there certain points at which it accelerated?
Well, actually, we don't know that. We think that the decline has been pretty steady over the years, but it's been steady to the point where we now have so few left that the decline seems even faster as we go forward.
And are there different subspecies of the African lion, and are the different subspecies affected in different ways?
Well, officially there's only two lion subspecies that are recognized. The one is in Africa, and the other one is in, there's a very small population of lions that is left in India.
Right.
Now, however, what has recently come to light is through some genetic work that has been done by a university in Holland. They have shown that the Western and Central African lions are actually more genetically related to the Indian lions than to the other lions in Africa. So you have a very strange division. Western and Central African lions are almost like Indian lions, and the Eastern and Southern African lions are separated off by themselves.
I had no idea.
So in Africa, you might say that there are two subspecies.
So making three in total, the Asian lion and then these two. And what factors have contributed to the decline in the wild lion populations?
Well, we think there that the decline has been pretty much inevitable, because you know what has been happening in Africa in the last 50 years, certainly, and probably a little bit before that, is that you've had quite substantial growth in human populations. And when you get growth in human populations, you get growth in livestock populations. More and more land is demanded, and you know, expansion of agriculture and things like that. So where lions used to roam, what you see now is that there's a lot of cattle walking around and that there's a lot of crops being grown.
Mm-hmm.
But I think those days, in terms of declines, are almost over. I think
Mm-hmm.
that there are so few lion populations outside the protected areas these days that what we are seeing in terms of the declines are more and more attributable to trophy hunting, sport hunting.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Hmm. And then now they have another threat. I read the article on your blog about lion bones now being in demand for use in traditional Chinese medicine. Can you give us some insight on that?
Well, it's something that has recently come to our attention
Mm-hmm.
because there have been some very strange aspects of exports to, and in this case, most of these bones appear to be going to Laos and a little bit fewer to Vietnam. But
Mm-hmm.
this has only been happening in the last few years. But people in Africa have been alerting us to the fact that these lion bones have been being shipped out for quite some time. For example, I think it was in the 19. Let me look this up for you. Somewhere in the yeah, in 2010, it was estimated that 1 kilo, so 2 pounds or whatever, a little bit more than 2 pounds,
Mm-hmm.
of lion bones you could sell for about $300. And a couple of years before that, that same kilo would only fetch about $10 in terms of the commercial market. So there's
Huh.
been a huge jump. There's been a huge jump recently in the
Mm-hmm.
value of lion bones, and this was driven by this traditional medicine market,
Mm-hmm.
where since we have so few tigers that used to provide the bones,
Mm-hmm.
and I must say that these bones are largely sold as what used to be called tiger bone wine and is now lion bone wine, and it solves things supposedly like rheumatism and things like that. But since lion bones, since tiger bones are now so difficult to obtain, there's been a switch to these lion bones.
Huh. And they're being marketed as lion bones. They're not being uh, sold as tiger bones. They're not disguised, so to speak, as tiger bones.
That I don't know.
Uh-huh.
I think the product is still being sold as tiger bone wine,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but I think somewhere along the line somebody made the decision that lion bones were just as good as tiger bones, so they're being substituted very very widely these days.
Oh my gosh. Now, what countries are exporting the lion bones?
Well, the export seems to largely come from South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see from the trade records that other countries are exporting large amounts of lion bones to any other country in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And they come from South Africa because there it is the only country in Africa that has a very large captive breeding program that has been set up for lions.
Oh,
Now,
okay. Huh.
now you have to understand that South Africa sort of prides itself in its conservation record and doing good things for wild species. And one of the things that they're doing a lot of, and you also know this from rhinos,
Mm-hmm.
is that they have allowed a lot of wildlife species to be placed in private hands.
Right.
And as a result of that, what you see is there's quite a lot of rhinos that are being ranched and farmed,
Mm-hmm.
and also what has been happening is that the ranchers and the farmers have figured out that lions are commercially quite, they're worth quite a lot of money if you sell them to trophy hunters.
Mm-hmm.
So what has happened is that these days there are about 4,000 lions in captivity, all being bred to supply this trophy hunting market.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as a spin-off from this trophy hunting market, because the trophy hunter only wants a skin
Mm-hmm.
and the head and things like that, maybe some claws, and they don't necessarily want the bones.
Mm-hmm.
So what has been happening more and more is that since the farmers and the ranchers and the breeders realize that these bones now have value, they are now being exported to various countries in Asia.
Oh, now tell us how that's legal, or if that is, because there just seems to be all kinds of wrong with that. But it's legal, isn't it?
It's 100% legal. It's nobody is going to prevent the export of lion bones, especially if they come from a captive source.
Huh.
In this case, with the captive bred lions.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the things that has happened with allowing wildlife species into private hands, is
Mm-hmm.
that the private owners obviously want to make the maximum profits that they can.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore, if they can sell, in some cases, they're selling the lion twice in this case, once for its trophy value and once for its bones.
Oh, so this could even be intentional then, the fact that they're using both the head and the body of the lion. So this is almost like a second business that they're able to get into.
Absolutely. And, some people are even saying that they're now going back to places where they had buried the lion bones before from past hunts,
Mm-hmm.
and digging them up again to be exported.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's morbid, but people will do crazy things for money. Whew. Now with these, you said that these captive breeding ranches where they're breeding the lions so that they can be hunted, are these also the places where people go and pose with the lions and handle the lions? Are we talking about tame animals here?
Well, there has been some controversy about
Mm-hmm.
the sort of walking with lions and petting lion cubs and breeding
Mm-hmm.
of lions and things like that. Now you have to understand, that in South Africa, and as is the case all over the world,
Mm-hmm.
there's a demand for these young cubs because people like to walk around with them and stroke them and pet them and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. But these lions obviously grow up,
Mm-hmm.
and then what do you do with them? There's no place to put these tame by now and lions that are used to humans. There's no place to put them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So people are saying that a lot of these programs that have these sort of petting zoos contribute directly to the canned hunting. Canned hunting meaning hunting of these captive bred animals. And so therefore that it's all one and the same sort of process. And again, it's a way of making some money off your lions, because when they're small you can walk around with them, and then when they're big you can hunt them, and then you can sell their bones now too. So they're really making a lot of profit off these animals.
Wow. Now, speaking of the trophy hunting and the bones and the this traditional Chinese medicine market, do you anticipate, or maybe have you already seen, an increase in these pseudo hunters from the countries which would traditionally be consuming tiger products, kind of like what we've seen with the rhinos. They're able to go and legally kill the animal, legally take the part out, but then obviously it's not going up on their wall. It's not a trophy. It's going straight to the traditional medicine market. Have you seen or do you anticipate that kind of activity?
Well, we are starting to see that, and what seems to be happening is that, look, people have come from all over the world to hunt lions in southern Africa and eastern Africa and western Africa and places like that. But these have always been hunters from, let's say, the USA, from France, from Germany, from Spain. You know, those are the big countries that where people are what I would call traditional trophy hunters. You know, these are the guys that go out and actually shoot trophies. From the Asian countries, we've hardly seen any kind of activity in terms of trophy hunting until, as you know, what happened with the rhinos. All of a sudden, there was a big interest from Vietnam and also from Thailand and places like that, where suddenly nationals of those countries became avid trophy hunters. Now, this has never been seen before, and you know, you go back through the export records from, I think you can go back to about 1975, but you can go back, you know, all those years, and there's been absolutely no interest. And then all of a sudden, there was a big interest in hunting rhinos. From people from Vietnam and Thailand, for example. And we're starting to see that happening now because I think in the past, just in the past year, now you have to understand that these records are still being compiled, all right? So we're now talking about 2010, where the information is still being put together, right? And in 2010, all of a sudden, what we have seen is that 43 lion trophies were exported to Laos. And none in any year before that, and none to anywhere else in Asia before that. So a jump from 0 to 43 is pretty significant. And like I said, you know, these are preliminary.
Yeah.
So the 43 number might even go up. But all of a sudden, it has become sort of an in thing to do, you know, for people in Laos. You can't imagine that somebody in Laos would actually go out and come and trophy hunt a lion unless there is some kind of other reason why they're doing that. And again, it's the same thing as with the rhinos, where, as you know, there has been what has now been termed pseudo trophy hunting, where they come out, they'll shoot a rhino, but they're not interested in the trophy hunt or anything like that. They're just interested in the horn. Yes. And I think what's happening now is we're starting to see the same thing with the lions, where these guys are not interested in any kind of aspect of trophy hunting. What they want is the body and perhaps other parts.
Ugh. Yeah, definitely suspicious.
The point that I was trying to make is that we have seen this pattern developing in terms of the rhino poaching story, where first there was all this pseudo trophy hunting going on. There were legal exports of rhino horns to various Asian countries, and now all of a sudden, you know, once you fuel that demand, then the supply cannot keep up anymore. And
exactly.
That's why we're seeing so much of this. You know, that's why we're seeing so much of this poaching going on in South Africa. I think what are we up to for 2011? It was 448 animals that have been poached, and you know, we're already up to something over 30, 40.
135
this year.
135.
Yeah.
Yep. At this.
So
at this
once you start a demand cycle going, you're left with all kinds of people who want to take advantage of that demand which is pretty much insatiable, it seems, in Asia.
Yeah.
And I'm really worried that what we're going to start seeing is the same thing with the lions, because it's already following the same pattern. You know, you have the legal exports of bones. You have the pseudo trophy hunting starting now. Next thing you'll find is that we will start to see lions being poached in various countries to deliver these bones.
Oh yeah, I agree. I think that is going to be a trend, unfortunately.
It's an indication that you know, these people who are wanting these wildlife products are now faced with only being able to get them from Africa.
Oh gosh. Now, I know that you guys have been doing some work in getting the African lions uplisted. Can you talk a little more about how uplisting the lions from CITES Appendix 2 to Appendix 1 will help with this situation that's going on with the African lions?
Well, I think the uplisting is good for a number of reasons. But you know, a lot of people think that once a species is uplisted to Appendix 1 of CITES, that means that there's no more trade, and that's not right, because you know, there's a lot of trade in CITES 1 species.
Yes.
For example, leopards are on CITES Appendix 1, but they're, you know, being trophy hunted left, right, and center still.
Yes.
Now, what the difference between putting it on CITES Appendix 1 is that the world community is alerted to the fact that there's something going on with that species that urgently needs to be addressed. In other words, it's now much more critical to look at what is happening in terms of populations of that species. So I think what's important for the uplisting is that first of all, there's the realization by the world community that this species, in this case now lions, is in a lot of trouble. And secondly, what happens is that any kind of trade in that species is now being looked at much more carefully. And for example, with for Appendix 1 species, it has to be shown for the country to be able to continue to export them. It has to be shown that the exports are actually good for the conservation of the species, that it's monitored by professional biologists. So, you know, there's a lot more checks and balances that come into play once you get onto Appendix 1.
Good.
It's a way of telling people, look, you know, there's some real problems with these animals. We cannot continue as we have before in terms of exporting their products and being engaged in trophy hunting. It becomes a much more strictly regulated process. And the other thing that's really important is that with Appendix 1 species, it's not only an export license that is required, but also an import license.
Oh, okay.
And that's important because if an import license is required, individual countries can make up their own minds as to whether or not they believe that the importation of that species is good or bad for the animal. What this means, for example, is that in the USA, they have decided, this is U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they have decided that they will not allow any kind of trophy hunting imports of cheetahs, for example, right? But cheetah trophies are perfectly legal to be imported into Europe. So it's the United States that has decided, no, we don't agree with the importation of cheetah trophies, so therefore we individually can decide to put a ban on the import. So that's the power of the individual import requirements that are needed for Appendix 1 species.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's not going to be easy. It's, uplisting for some reason is scary to a lot of countries and to a lot of people, because you have to realize that uplisting will mean stricter controls, like I was saying earlier.
Yes,
And,
yes.
There's a lot of people out there that are making a lot of money off of lion trophy hunting,
Right.
and they feel very, very threatened by this, and what they're trying to do is to try and exercise whatever influence they have to convince the various African lion range states that uplisting is a very bad idea.
Yeah, they don't want to have anything happen to the profits, and they don't want any more checks and balances. They just want to keep doing what they're doing the way they're doing it and not have anyone looking at them.
Yep. That's exactly right.
Yep. Well, can you tell us some more about LionAid and what people can do to help support the work that you're doing?
Well, Rhishja, we are a relatively small charity, but to pat ourselves on the back, we've only been operating for about 2 years, and in those 2 years, we have achieved considerable success. Now, what we have decided to do is, there's a lot of charities and organizations and foundations out there that support lion projects. In other words, looking at lion populations in the wild and funding field work and things like that. Now, I used to be out in the field. I spent 10 years in Botswana studying lions. But in actual fact, if you look at the decline in lions, this has been going on unabated since, like I said, the 1960s, which also in the 1960s was the year that the first lion research project started in the Serengeti. So even though there have been a lot of research projects out there, lions have continued to decline. And what we decided to do was to take a political approach, because actually it's politicians, like it or not, who are decision makers in terms of a lot of aspects of wildlife conservation, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have been campaigning very hard here in the UK and increasingly in Europe, and I'm pretty sure that you'll see us turning up in the US pretty soon.
Oh, good.
We have just recently been funded by the UK government to hold a very important conference in Africa. We have something like 11 African lion range states attending, and these are not scientists. These are members of their management and scientific authorities who are going to sit around the table and discuss the best way forward for their lion populations. Mm-hmm. What is going to happen is that these decision makers need to sit down and they need to say, well, how many lions do we want in our countries? Where do we want these lions to occur? And once we've made those decisions, how are we going to ensure that those populations are protected? And that's the only way that we're going to reverse the tremendous decline in these lion populations.
Outstanding. And how can people help you guys out? What do people do to get involved and help LionAid?
Well, as you know, all of this stuff, this campaigning, this traveling, these organizations that we have to talk to, the countries that we have to visit, it all costs money. So we're back to an appeal for donations. Mm-hmm. Now we have we would like to see that what we could receive is individual donations, and we're getting those from people who are convinced that we're doing good work. what we would also like to see is corporate sponsorship, things like that. The usual ways of funding organizations that are doing good work in terms of conservation of species.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now, we have our website, which is www.lionaid.org, and people can go on there and they can read, the various blogs that we've been putting up, the news items, and they can get a good idea of what we're doing. And I stress again that we're very young, and we've only been working for 2 years, but we're effective because we're small, and we're effective because we can move fast, and we're effective because we knock on lots and lots of doors, and we don't go away. Once we want to talk to somebody, and once we want somebody to listen to us,
Mm-hmm.
we'll be on the phone pretty much every single day to you until you come forward and sit down and talk with us about what you can do to save lions.
Good.
They're one of the most iconic species in the world. They're important to a huge number of cultures. And one of the things that we're also trying to do is to convince UNESCO to consider lions as a World Heritage species. You know that UNESCO has a lot of these World Heritage sites
Yes.
all over the world. So why not have a World Heritage species? Because lions are important to cultures all over the world. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
China, Japan, Korea, India has, the national emblem of India is a couple of lions. You've got lions on flags all over the place. Singapore is named Singa. It means lion, and lions are frightfully important. In Western cultures, you've got 2 lions sitting outside the public library in New York. You've got lions on Trafalgar Square. They're all over the place. They're terribly important to a lot of cultures because of the implied characteristics that we associate with lions, like strength, nobility, etc.
Yes. Well, that all sounds excellent, and I'm so glad that you took time to talk to us today. It was really great to speak with you.
Well, you're very welcome.
You've been listening to The Increased Demand for Lion Bones with Dr. Pieter Kat of LionAid. This is Rhishja Cota-Larson with Behind the Schemes.